There's a lot of chaos going on around the planned Trump-Putin meeting. The diplomatic landscape remains in flux, and reports raise questions about the potential for peace talks between Trump and the Russian President Putin, and indeed also President Zelensky. And among the key issues is a suggestion that Ukraine might consider a land swap as part of a peace agreement, a proposal that appears to challenge Zelensky's long-standing position on territorial integrity, which is part of the Ukrainian constitution. Meanwhile, Ukrainian drone strikes on Crimea further highlight Kyiv's firm stance on reclaiming its sovereign territory. The paradox suggests a growing tension between diplomatic isolation, diplomatic negotiations, and military realities. And Trump is claiming that Zelensky is open to this deal, but I don't see any clear evidence that that is likely. On yesterday, on August the 7th, President Trump said Putin was open to negotiations involving territorial exchanges or land swaps, and according to reports, this includes potential discussions about Crimea, which was illegally annexed by Russia in 2014, as well as parts of Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhia, Kherson. It's interesting that now, today, we're getting this news that it's parts of these regions, whereas yesterday it was the entire region, which, of course, the entire region of Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson was already defined by Russia in a presidential decree as part of Russia, as well as Crimea. And under Russian law, Russia can't cede Russian territory. The proposal, as reported by Bloomberg, was discussed during a call between Trump, Zelensky, and several European leaders, and the notion of land swaps implies a compromise on territorial disputes. While it remains unclear what precisely Trump meant by this term, it most likely refers to the possibility of ceding or exchanging contested areas to broker a ceasefire. And this mirrors Putin's own demands, which have included Ukraine's foregoing NATO membership and pulling back from the territories Russia has illegally annexed. However, Zelensky's position, as enshrined in the Ukrainian constitution, contradicts the notion of any land swap involving Crimea. Ukraine consistently refuses to cede any territory, including Crimea, which it still considers to be part of its sovereign territory. And Zelensky reiterated this position in May 2025, explicitly stating that Ukraine would only discuss territorial issues after a full, unconditional ceasefire. Moreover, Zelensky has said that any discussions on territorial changes would not happen until Russia halted its aggression entirely. And these remarks are in line with Ukraine's broader rejection of any preconditions in peace talks. But it does suggest that Zelensky would be open to ceding territory. This stance is underscored by Ukrainian drone attacks in Crimea, escalating tensions with Russia, and just days before Trump's comments, Ukraine's military intelligence struck multiple high-value Russian targets on the peninsula, including a fast assault landing craft and radar stations, and these military actions underscore that Ukraine, despite diplomatic discussions, remains committed to reclaiming its territory. Trump's suggestion of a land swap, coupled with Zelensky's refusal to negotiate on territorial concessions, reflects a contradiction in the ongoing peace process. On the one hand, Trump is pushing for an agreement that includes territorial exchanges, which may implicitly include Crimea. On the other hand, Zelensky has made it abundantly clear that Ukraine considers Crimea non-negotiable. This inconsistency is further compounded by the realities of the war. Ukraine's military strategy, as seen in recent drone attacks on Crimea, signals no intention to relinquish control over that region. In fact, these strikes represent a symbolic reaffirmation of Ukraine's territorial claims. Furthermore, the Ukrainian constitution explicitly recognizes Crimea as part of Ukraine, making any land swap involving Crimea politically impossible within the current framework. So as these broader diplomatic and military tensions pay out, the potential Trump-Putin-Zelensky trilateral summit is becoming increasingly important. Trump's plan to meet with Putin, followed by a possible trilateral meeting, marks a significant shift in the diplomatic effort. However, the optics of such a meeting, where Zelensky would be forced to consider a proposal that contradicts Ukraine's core position on Crimea, could be challenging for both Ukraine and its allies. European leaders have been cautious about sidelining Ukraine in peace talks, with Zelensky emphasizing the importance of European involvement. Ukrainian officials have repeatedly stated that any peace deal must include the voices of European leaders, given the war's direct impact on the continent. But potential exclusion of Europe from high-level talks involving Trump and Putin may undermine the collective European response. Putin's continued insistence on territorial changes, including the recognition of Russia's illegal annexations, remains a stumbling block in negotiations. Zelensky's rejection of these demands highlights Ukraine's commitment to maintaining its sovereignty. Additionally, despite Trump's optimism, the lack of clear progress in these negotiations, evidenced by the failure of previous meetings, suggests that Putin remains entrenched in its demands, even as his position weakens on the battlefield. Putin has demonstrated a willingness to engage in peace talks, but has not moved from his stance of preconditions. Meanwhile, Zelensky's refusal to concede territory, despite military pressure, sends a clear message. Any peace that sacrifices Ukraine's territorial integrity will not be acceptable. The growing contradictions between Trump's calls for land swaps, Zelensky's unwavering stance on Crimea, reflect the complex nature of the peace process. And while there are diplomatic efforts to bring an end to the war, the reality on the ground, marked by Ukrainian military actions and firm constitutional principles, suggests that any agreement involving territorial concessions will be difficult to achieve. The trilateral summit, if it proceeds, will likely highlight the rift between the diplomatic aspirations of Trump and the territorial realities that Ukraine continues to defend. Ultimately, while the world watches these high-stakes talks unfold, one thing is clear. Ukraine's commitment to its territorial integrity remains unshaken, and any peace process that demands land swaps will likely face significant resistance. It would be nice to know that you could trust what Trump says, but obviously that's an expectation which goes a little bit too far.